the Hogsty with your crew, Alex Zeese, Steve Thomas, and Robbie Duncan. And now, here's your host, Sean Conti.
Hey there, folks. Sean, Robbie, Steve, and Alex here with you today. The Redskins win into this one with confidence, but after 60 minutes of game time and a 17-hour overtime, could only muster a tie in today's Flag Fest. And you know what they say about ties? In a tie, everyone loses. It's a disappointment for all involved, including Jay Gruden, who likely really wanted that win against his former team in Cincinnati. The one silver lining, seems like there were a decent number of Redskins fans over there at Wembley. So let's go through it. Here to talk about that and the rest of the game, a very special guest, writer for the Washington Post. He's not a full Brit, he's just British. Please welcome Mr. Mark Bullock.
Hey
Mark.
Thanks for having me on.
Welcome to the show, man. So happy to have you. Seemed like a very appropriate time to have you on the show, considering the game today. Right over in your neck of the woods, man. What was that like?
Yeah, it was good to see not only the NFL getting some more attention on TV and stuff here, but mainly the Redskins. It was pretty cool to see.
Yeah, I can imagine that would be pretty sweet finally to have the team over there, since you're usually writing about them over here in this part of the country. So, guys, we can just go through it. This was kind of depressing. It seemed like the Redskins died, got life, came back at the end just to muster a tie. Super disappointing. I don't even know. Where do you guys want to start?
Well, let's start with the numbers since it's all emotional and whatnot. All right, Kirk Cousins, 38 of 56 attempts. That's got to be a personal record for him.
Yeah. Attempts-wise?
458 yards, 8.2 yards per carry, 2 touchdowns, 1 interception, 1 sack, quarterback rating of 97.2. Robert Kelly, who started today, 21 carries, 87 yards, 4.1 yards average, which got boosted by his last run there in the last series in overtime. Chris Thompson, 7 carries, 14 yards, didn't do much on the ground. Jameson Crowder, 9 catches, 107 yards. Jordan Reed, 9 catches, 99 yards. Vernon Davis had a big day, 5 catches, 93 yards. Pierre Garçon sighting today, 6 catches, 67 yards.
Angry Pierre today.
Yeah, angry Pierre. Deshaun went out early, but had 3 catches, 48 yards. And then Chris Thompson, 5 catches, 27 yards. And we had a Ryan Grant showing for some reason. I don't understand why. 1 catch, 17 yards. So that is Redskins offense today.
Sounds like we won. If I'm not mistaken.
Except for that pesky score thing.
Goddamn score thing. Oh, it gets us every time.
Well, Mark, tell us what did you see in Kirk Cousins today? I mean, there were some ups and some downs. Obviously, he had huge stats.
Yeah, it's kind of a sort of typical Kirk Cousins performance for where he's kind of at now. Right. He puts up a lot of big numbers. A lot of it comes on underneath routes where the guys like you've mentioned, Crowder, Reed, Vernon Davis today, Garçon and Djax, they all pick up extra yards after the catch and pad out his stats. I think he actually, for the most part, he was pretty solid. Obviously, the interception wasn't a great throw, but everyone's kind of going back and forth on, oh, well, it was just an arm punt, and we ended up pinning them down inside their own 20 and whatnot. And, you know, it is what it is. The rest of the game, I can't think of any other too many terrible throws other than, you know, the Hail Mary attempt at the end, but that was pretty weak. But, you know, at that point,
it's almost cute, guys.
I mean, you have like a 0.01% chance of winning the game no matter what at that situation. I don't know what your
Aaron Rodgers would have made that throw.
Anyway. Yeah.
Now,
exactly.
I'll say this. I mean, he wasn't given a lot of time on the Hail Mary. He had to roll out, and you got to block your ass off on that kind of thing. It's the end of the game. Hail Mary, you got to give your quarterback time to, you know, get the ball off. And, you know, asking him to roll out to his left, it's just not – it's not going to work out in your favor.
Yeah, you know, thanks to Fox and the bizarre NFL broadcast rules, they cut the broadcast off in my area. Thanks, Fox. But on the so I saw some of the overtime, but I heard it mostly on the radio. I didn't see the Hail Mary. But what I would sitting here wondering, you know, that was pass number 56 spread out over 75 game minutes.
Right.
You know, I'm wondering if what was it, 50 yards, right? I mean, at least we were on about the 49-yard line.
Something like that. We were midfield.
So the pass had to go 55, 60 yards in the air, you know. I'm wondering if after that long and that many throws that he just had a dead arm, you know, kind of like a pitcher hits a wall.
I mean, it could be. That's a fair point. I mean, we as fans don't really think about that, how the strain of the game would be on a player like that, especially
That's a lot
after
of passes.
overtime. Yeah,
50, yeah.
yeah.
I mean,
Only
how
a handful
often
of
does
guys
a
can
game
throw that
come
many
down?
passes.
Yeah, and I mean, how often does a game come down to a final 50-yard Hail Mary at the very end of overtime that results in a tie? Usually overtime's over a lot faster than that.
Like
I would not
two
be
a year
surprised.
at the most.
Yeah,
yeah,
exactly.
Yeah.
You know, I would not be surprised if his arm just wasn't up to snuff at that
I
point.
mean, I guess the other big story, obviously, is the start of Rob Kelly. You know,
Yeah, sure.
87 carries. Mark, what'd you see in Rob Kelly today?
87 carries?
I'm sorry, 87 yards. That's a lot of carries.
I would have been happy with 87 carries, actually.
21 carries, 87 yards. Mark, what'd you see in Rob Kelly?
Yeah, I mean, I've been one of the more defensive people over Matt Jones. I probably see more potential in him than most do. But when you see Rob Kelly getting in there and getting the start and being allowed to consistently build on his game and not be interrupted with being rotated in and out and all that kind of thing, he's clearly a much more natural runner, especially in the zone scheme. So he definitely looked more at home than Jones had done in the zone scheme. And he made a couple of nice cuts. I mean, obviously the touchdown run, he made two really, really good cuts.
First one of
Matt
his
Jones
career.
Matt Jones probably doesn't make that play. So yeah, I think he had a pretty solid game. Wasn't outstanding, but I mean, the Redskins' running game in general rarely is at this point. So I think it gives them something to build on. And I would say that Matt Jones, he'll probably be given the job back, but he'll have to work hard to keep the same number of reps he normally will get.
Yeah, I agree.
Well, first of all, I think on Matt Jones, I think the problem isn't his potential. The problem is his production. And he's got a ton of potential, and he just doesn't produce. But on this point, I'd like to point out that the run pass balance was 56 to passes, 31 runs today. And I thought that Jay Gruden got way far away from the run at various points in the game, particularly in overtime. In the early part of overtime, there was no need to go all pass all the time. And so I thought the game would have been better served if we had stuck with Kelly and got him a few more carries.
Well, let's talk about that overtime series while we're mentioning it. You see, for me, I said this on Twitter. I mean, no offense to Dustin Hopkins, he's been a really good kicker for us since he's been here.
Oh yeah,
It's a bad day.
But the field was not good for kicking. I mean, it was obviously playing an effect on it. My take on this is that they should have just, we were that close to the end zone. I say, go score. If you don't get it on third down and you're on fourth down, then you kick it. At least you'd probably would be a little bit closer. So if you shank it, you'd have to really shank it to miss.
So you're saying other than when we did the whole Kirk Cousins trying to center the ball thing?
Yeah, I did not agree with setting up the field goal. I mean, yes, it was like 35 yards. I mean, it's like a chip shot most of the time. But even then, you're right there at the end zone. Go score. I think it's just too safe, in my opinion.
I think I think the game kind of showed why, personally, I disagree with that, because I think what you saw, the two plays before that, we took a penalty and nearly took ourselves out of field goal range. And the amount of penalties we had in the game and the amount of penalties that were called
absurd.
From stuff like hands to the face and all this kind of stuff was being called.
17 penalties or something.
Exactly.
Well, that's just on the Redskins, too.
It was 15 accepted penalties was my count, but they declined at least 2. So I think it was maybe 17 called, 15 accepted.
So, you risk a penalty, and that takes you out of field goal range altogether, and then you're not kicking a field goal to win the game, and you're not scoring a touchdown to win the game. You're thinking about punting it to the other team and giving them a chance. And then you saw Andy Dalton, when he got the ball, 3rd and 1, they went for, obviously, like they're going to go for it on 3rd and 1, but he fumbled the ball, he turned it over. So if you go for it and you keep going for the touchdown rather than the field goal, you risk a pick six that would end the game. You risk a turnover, a fumble, and you risk a penalty which takes you out of field goal range or makes the field goal even harder to make.
Well, sure. But I mean, Rob Kelly, he had that big run, 16 yards. And then you follow that with just setting up a kick. I feel like you could have just kept running it with Rob Kelly, get what you can. If you don't score, kick it. That's just my thing. I think they were showing that we could have done something more than just settling for setting up a field goal.
If nothing else, you could have gotten a little closer.
Well, I would just remind you guys that we can't score in the red zone, but we seem to have a better chance scoring outside of it, from outside of the red zone. So, Jordan Reed's awesome play today, by the way. That was such a sweet touchdown run.
Oh, my God.
When he changed direction there and just ran for 30 or 25 yards.
Yeah, it was great.
Yeah.
That was a great. It just seems like, I don't know, we sometimes get bogged down in the red zones. I kind of hear both sides of that. To Robbie's point, go ahead and score, because it seems like we can do that if we stay aggressive outside of the red zone. But Mark's right. Why would you hang around? And,
I was just curious why.
Screw up?
I was just curious why the kicking was so bad in general. I don't know if it had to
all
do
over the league,
the moisture and the weather, in England, or
they
what.
mentioned how the field was slick before the game.
Yeah,
I think it had a big.
They should be used to, though, right? I mean, it's got to be something else.
I don't know.
It was a weird, bad juju day. Yeah,
it obviously had an effect on it because Nugent missed his kick, and his extra point. It had some sort of effect on the kickers. Right.
Mark, can you tell us what is wrong with the grass in England?
Yeah, what's your problem, Mark?
I think it's just people trying to kick any sort of ball in any sort of sport in England tends to go badly.
Is that why
experience.
Soccer just has such low scoring games? It's the weird grass.
Well, yeah. If there's English players involved, that'll be why.
See, I think it would have been fitting since we were in England and the way the kicking game was going, to just end the game in overtime after the clock ran out with field goal shootouts. Whoever wins, I think it would have been perfect.
Field goal shootouts. Either 5 field goals each, or no field goal kickers are allowed to kick them.
And
with goalies.
Yeah, the team's tallest player is their goalie. So I guess Ty and Secchi would be our goalie.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, let's put that on Dustin Hopkins. Yeah, great. No, if you're going to do that, you're going to have random players rotate in and do the field goal. It's not
exactly.
That would be part of the rules. You have to use other people than kickers.
You have to make Ty and Secchi try to kick a field goal.
Yeah, let's see Chris Baker try that.
All right. Anyway, back to offense. I thought that Cousins made maybe his best deep pass of the game, of the season. Let's see, was his first quarter, early in the second quarter, the sideline route to Vernon Davis is 35 yards. That was one of the first times all season I've really seen Cousins on a long pass be able to
really
drop.
Nice one to Djax today too.
Yeah, he did. I mean, he was able to drop the ball in such a way that allowed the receiver to keep running and not slow down. Almost all of his deep passes that have been completed this season have been a little bit underthrown, where the receiver has to slow down to get the ball. And that pass and the Deshaun Jackson pass you're talking about, both he dropped them in perfectly. So kudos to him for those two passes. So what else have we seen in the offense today that we can review?
Sean Laval was really struggling in that game.
Yeah.
Really struggling.
Yeah.
What'd you see? Just tell us O-line in general. What'd you see?
Overall, I thought they were doing really well for the most part. I mean, Sean Laval, he was really struggling when he had to pass block one-on-one. I really think his ankle injury is playing more an effect than we think. Yeah, because he just doesn't seem to have the ability to stay with guys, especially when most of the time when he gets beat, it's around his right shoulder. I don't know. It doesn't seem like he can kick, to his right very well and stay with the guy that he's blocking, because that's every time he gets beat like that, it's around his inside shoulder. And then there's the other times where he just gets blown up and put on his butt.
That seems to happen 2 or 3 times a game, every game to him. Honest. I put the sack on him. It looked like the sack came right over Laval. Is that accurate?
Yeah, I think it was. I'd have to look back at it again, but I think it is. Yeah,
live. That's what it looked like, at least. All right. Well, game plan wise, I mean, this is in the past 3 weeks we've had pretty good run pass balance. I mentioned it earlier, and we kind of glazed right over it. This is the first game in a long time where it really got dramatically out of whack. We're almost up to almost twice as many passes as runs. Part of that was situational, I understand, but nonetheless, the sideline reporter at halftime mentioned that Gruden wanted to get back to the run in the second half, and he did a little bit, but not really.
I mean, how much of that do you really put on the fact that the Bengals were out there just trying to stop our run most of the time? I mean, how many yards did you say Kirk had?
458.
I mean, clearly they were not focusing on the passing game.
Yeah.
Well, Mark,
that's
what'd
a
you
great
see?
point.
What's your input into this?
Yeah, I mean they played for the run a little bit. You saw Kirk had those bootlegs open most of the day, and generally the indication is when he has those, they're playing the run, and when he doesn't have those, they're playing the pass. There's usually a pretty good indication on how the defense are trying to play us. So I thought just certainly the opening drive they were fantastic and they had great balance. And I didn't think they did too bad of a job of trying to stay balanced going into the second half. But obviously, once the Bengals took the lead after a couple of stalled drives, you have to kind of pass to get back into it to catch up. So it's a tough one. It's a tough one to stay balanced, and obviously it got a little bit out of whack. And I think the overtime will have played into that. They probably in overtime went more to, well, what we do well is throw to Crowder, throw to Garcon, throw to Reed. So they kind of stuck with that, and especially in a sudden death situation where if you don't score on this possession, you could lose the game. So I think that's probably what they went more back to in overtime, which is why they probably got away from it there. But yeah, they could have possibly run the ball more in the second half. But I wasn't too disappointed because, I mean, what did they end the game with? 31 runs, did you say?
31 runs, yeah.
I mean, that's not a bad number of runs.
No.
Yeah, I'm not as down
total.
on that as you are, Steve.
It's not one of those games where we ran it 10 times.
Right,
yeah,
exactly.
it's not Matt Jones running 7 times in the opening game or whatever little amount he had.
Well, yeah, I wasn't really so much down on it as I just wanted to point out that it was dramatically out of whack. I mean, there is a reason for it, as you guys have pointed out.
Yeah.
I just meant this is the first game when it's been that far out of whack in quite a while. That's all. And for that matter, it was at the end of the fourth quarter, we were at 24 runs and 44 passes. And so at the end of a regular game, it was a little bit closer if you want to do percentage run, percentage pass.
Right.
Yeah, sure. I mean, this was not our easiest defensive matchup this year. This is a good defensive team with a lot of star players, across the defense. I'm not surprised that they were able to, or I'm not surprised they honed in kind of on one thing and tried to make us one-dimensional there, and it more or less paid off in the end, I guess.
Well, yeah, and let's talk about the Bengals defense too. Mark, I don't know what you saw, but the Bengals played cover 2, played a 4-3 cover 2 quite a bit, in the game, maybe exclusively, and I think the point there was clearly to take away the deep routes to Deshaun by having the 2 safeties back. And I know there was at least once or twice when it looked like, and the broadcast team mentioned it too, where Kirk was trying to look downfield and Deshaun just wasn't open. I mean, before he went out. And so I think that the defense was designed to draw us into that short passing game that Kirk does so well.
Yeah. I mean, that kind of is the game plan for most teams. It has been this season, is to take away the deep balls to Deshaun Jackson, and that limits the offense. Force Kirk to sit in the pocket and try to go through different reads and check it down and be patient with Dink and Dunk. And that works for the Redskins very well last year, but Kirk's trying to press a little bit more. He's trying to, rather than just dump it off every time, he's trying to find the guys sort of in the intermediate levels, and he's not having as much success with that. So that's kind of the game plan that most teams seem to be going with this year. And I guess it's working. They didn't come away with the win today.
Well, one other thing I'd like to ask you, Mark, is in the past couple of weeks, as Jordan Reed has been out, we've talked on this show about whether or not Reed being out maybe forced Kirk. By forcing Kirk to look to other receivers, maybe it was going to open up the offense a little bit more when Jordan returned. Because he's very focused on Jordan when Jordan's out there. And today he did spread the ball out, very well at the end of it all.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the thing I would say to that is, Jordan Reed's a damn good player. If I was the quarterback, I'd be focusing on him as well. And there's so many times in the past, however long we've had Reed, the past couple of years, where we start going to him early, and then like by the end of the game, we said, how did Jordan Reed not take over that game? How did he not have 10 catches for God knows however many yards and a couple of touchdowns? So I don't have a problem with him necessarily focusing on Reed as most people do, because he more often than not he's open and he's making catches and he's usually bailing us out of bad throws and getting first downs on a 3rd and 40 with a 2-yard check down or something like that. So I don't have much problem with that. But yeah, he did do a much better job of spreading the ball around. I mean, on the opening drive, Crowder, Garcon, Vernon Davis, Jordan Reed all got catches on that first drive. So
we really did.
Everyone got a pretty good look today. Yeah, shame didn't carry on with the rest of it.
I'm a big fan of how they're still being productive with Vernon Davis with Jordan Reed back. I mean, I think a lot of people thought Vernon Davis would kind of fall back into the shadows behind Jordan Reed, but I mean, both of them still had huge games. So I think it's really good thing that they're doing with that, because it's like a Gronk. And, tight ends that as much, and that's what they.
Gronk and Hernandez minus officials multiple murder charge.
Yeah.
Right.
All right. Well, shall we move over then to talk about our day over on the defensive side of things? Seemed like there were a lot of injuries. Just the first thing that comes to mind. Jesus Christ, we were getting decimated there. But some good things. Other bad things. Where do we want to start?
Well, let's start with Cincinnati offensive stats, eh? Andy Dalton was 27 of 42, 284 yards, 6.8 yards per attempt, 1 touch and 1 interception, 81.8 rating. Jeremy Hill, 20 carries, 76 yards. Giovanni Bernard, 11 for 52. A.J. Green, we need to talk about A.J. Green. 9 receptions, 121 yards. Tyler Eifert, 9 catches, 102 yards, and it goes down from there.
Okay. Gotcha. So, I mean, all things considered, what do you take away from that, Steve? What's the message that we should learn from this on defense?
Well, I mean, I think Josh Norman had a tough time with A.J. Green, number one. But he had 5 penalties, 3 of which were accepted. And we need to talk about the penalties, by the way. I don't mean to go.
No, you're right.
I guess now's the time. I thought that was the most ticky-tacky called game against the Redskins, and it just wasn't the same against the Bengals.
Well, 2 things that stick out to me real quick on penalties. One, I don't understand how that offensive holding that Garcon got in the final drive or so.
It was pass interference.
Offensive pass interference.
The announcer was saying it from the angle that the ref saw. It looked like the guy was backing up or something. Yeah, no, it was a very
basically they called it a push off.
Right, and then on Crowder's touchdown, he got his face mask yanked halfway around his head, and they didn't call that.
Yeah,
and there was the helmet-to-helmet hit on Deshaun Jackson that they missed too.
There's that too.
He was just channeling his best Linda Blair impression for Halloween, guys.
My thing on the penalties, I was tweeting all about it. It angered me beyond belief, but I mean, a lot of them were penalties. I mean, some of them, no, like the Garcon one is debatable, but I mean, the ones called on Norman were hands to the face. Unfortunately, I mean, as soft as they were, it's not like he just like straight jacked him in the face.
Right, more a little ticky-tacky.
It didn't just cold cock him in the face.
But you can't do it. I know what he's trying to jam him at the line, but you have to do it lower. I mean, A.J. Green's a tall dude. You can't hit him in the face. They can see that. So
he's a tall dude. Hit him in the groin. Damn
it. And Dunbar was being called for stuff that he deserved to be called for. We were just playing sloppy. I mean, not all of it was ticky-tacky, but a lot of it was just sloppy play.
Yeah, and I want to say to the sloppiness, especially and to the A.J. Green point as well, Josh Norman missed 3 interceptions covering?
Oh, yeah.
3.
At least.
Dropped 2 in his hands.
Yeah, I mean, we had 1, I think we were credited, Steve, with 1 turnover, is that right? But we should have had 4.
Yeah, well, let's go here, because I saw that, Mark, you retweeted something from my favorite site, PFF, which I hate quoting them because they're a fraud.
It's going to be a rant when Steve
they're a fraud, and they need to not have a site. But what you cited was good, and what you cited, Mark, was Green's stats against Norman. So what did you see in the Norman Green battle today?
Yeah, I mean, AJ Green is probably one of the top 3 receivers in the league. You could make a pretty damn good argument for him being the best receiver in the league. So I don't think there is a corner in the NFL that can cover him one-on-one. Josh Norman couldn't do it. Richard Sherman probably can't do it. And Darrelle Revis certainly now can't do it. So for that, I would say that I would preface this whole discussion with that, is that AJ Green is one hell of a receiver. Norman, I thought, did a decent job. He does what he normally does. He just didn't get the interception. He does from time to time give up catches. What makes Josh Norman great is that he will pop up with creating a turnover one way or another. And he forced the fumble that got called back because of a penalty early in the game. In the game, he got the 2 interceptions. You say 3. I think the third one was a little bit harsh. He was kind of diving backwards, having been beat.
I said 2, not 3.
I was the harsh one. I'll take the heat. I'll take the
So yeah, I mean that one was a little bit harsh. I'm kind of he got hands to the ball, but when he's falling backwards like that, I'm pretty happy to say he just broke up the pass and saved a touchdown.
He's also a corner. He's not meant to catch balls.
Exactly. If he could catch, he'd be on offense. But he had 2 that hit him in the hands, and I had people tweeting me today saying, "Oh well, he has that wrist injury, and perhaps that played something into it." But still, 2 balls that hit him straight in the hands, you'd expect him to intercept both of them, and they both. Yeah. Probably, if he catches them, he returns both of them for touchdowns. So,
could have swayed the whole game, man, right there.
Exactly.
Really? Yeah.
And that's normally what he would do. He'd normally make at least one of those interceptions and take it back and make the huge play that wins them the game.
And one of those could have been a pick 6 there too. It looked like. I believe it was the second one. Looked like it could have gone for a pick 6.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Yeah, I mean that would have been the difference. So
exactly. So yeah, he got beat a couple times. You expect that with AJ Green, he's going to beat anyone. I think he did a decent job. Certainly as good as anyone can do. And if he makes one of those interceptions and takes it all the way back, then we're all saying he's the best player we've ever signed, and he's fully worth the money. So
yeah, I mean, my take on it is I think the stats look worse on paper than Norman played in terms of play-to-play coverage on Green. Yes, he got beat a couple times, but for the most part, he was playing tight coverage on him. There were 1 or 2 plays where Green, Norman was in great position, but Green's just faster, and just got a step on him because of the speed issue.
And taller.
But my real issue with him is that you cannot have 5 penalties called on you in a game. That's at some point that has to end. He got 5 hands to the face calls. One of them might have been a PI, maybe, I can't remember. But they accepted 3 of them.
Bengals had 8 first downs from penalties.
Yeah, that's just completely inexcusable, and that is where I really fault Norman. That at a minimum at halftime, somebody should have sat him down and said, "You got to stop." But overall, I thought he did a decent job. I think the pundits are going to say he got beat. He lost the battle just because of all the yardage. And they're probably right, but it wasn't as bad as it looks. I thought he played fairly well, on a play-to-play basis.
Yeah, considering who he's covering, he did really well for the most part.
How do we do again on generating pressure, Steve? It seemed like we had some success there, particularly at the end of the game. We had a nice sack that ended one of their overtime drives.
Well, yeah, we had 3 sacks. Chris Baker had the one that was in the first half. Kerrigan had one. Sua Cravens had a sack. Oh, I'm sorry. Sua Cravens had one, so it was Baker, Kerrigan, Cravens today. I thought, I thought they blitzed a little bit more today than they do, on a normal basis, so that was good. We got some pressure, not a ton of pressure. Robbie, what did you see in the defensive line play?
It was inconsistent. I mean, we got hardly any pressure from our outside guys. All of our pressure really came from the interior. And from blitzing Sua Cravens, who got surprisingly a lot of push up front when he did.
Yeah, but he was very quiet until the end of the game too, wasn't he?
Yeah, he was. Yeah, I didn't really hardly see him that much.
I don't think he got any snaps till the end of the game. I think that's what it was.
Yeah.
Really? Okay.
I guess they're just still trying to protect him, keep him from really making himself worse or something. But Yeah, pressure was inconsistent. It showed better at the end, but I mean, up to that point, I wasn't very impressed with it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mark, we've talked, I don't know, the past couple of weeks about Ryan Kerrigan. I think we spent a decent amount of time on Ryan Kerrigan recently in these shows. And the reason is, from our unexpert eyes, it sure seems like he's kind of disappeared more this season than he has in other seasons. He's got his sacks. What is that? Maybe 6 sacks, I think, now on the season for him. But he hasn't made much of an impact. He had the one tipped ball today. But other than that, he seems to me to kind of disappear in games more than he did earlier in his career.
I don't know. He's always been for me. He's always been the kind of guy that he's a model professional and all that kind of stuff. The coaches love him. He's very coachable and all that stuff that everyone likes to say. But he's always been a guy that I think works best as your second pass rusher rather than your top tier guy. And at this point, he's being focused as the top guy, and he's being paid like the top guy, and he's not. I don't think he's ever produced the numbers or the consistent pressure that would go hand in hand with being paid and being called kind of their top guy. I think if we had, I mean, I hate to say like Junior Galette would suddenly make the defense all better, but if we had him on the other side doing what he can do, then Ryan Kerrigan Kerrigan would suddenly look a lot better, But
that's an answer we'll never get clarification on what that would be like. I don't think.
I don't know whether they'll bring him back next year. But with Kerrigan, for me, he's never been a guy that has been necessarily a consistent pressure and stuff like that. He's been kind of he'll flash these plays and he'll be very consistent against the run. He'll always be the right assignment, and he does a fantastic job of being aware to the screen passes, and he got the batted screen pass and all that kind of stuff. But in terms of pass rushing, he's never been a dominant guy. He's never been a guy that really takes over games. So I think that's kind of just more amplified this year because Trent Murphy's appeared out of nowhere, and everyone's going, well, if Trent Murphy's doing it, why isn't the guy they're paying millions and millions to do it? Why isn't he doing it? And Preston Smith hasn't done really anything this year. He's come close a couple times, but never been able to finish sacks off. So
sure,
I think the spotlight's going on Kerrigan more because of the other factors. I think he's kind of playing just like Ryan Kerrigan plays for me.
Is that why they've always played Kerrigan on the over the right tackle, not the left tackle, you think? I mean, what you mentioned is a good point because, we had Brian Arakpo here who was a more natural pass rusher. He was always on, over the other side. And Kerrigan's never been on the quarterback's blind side for the most part.
It's that, but it's also because he's partially deaf on his which ear is it? If he's
on the right side, it'd be his left
ear. His left ear is partially deaf, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, I think you're right on that.
Interesting.
But plus typically you have the stronger run defender play against the right tackle, which is what Kerrigan is. So
I mean, for both of you guys, I mean, Robbie and Mark, I mean, is Preston Smith having a sophomore slump or what is going on?
I know. I think he's just a guy at this moment that needs other guys around him. I don't think he's a starter at this point. I think he still needs time to develop as a pass rusher. I think he benefited last year because he had other guys taking the heat, which he got to take advantage of. I think if we had Junior Galette still in there and healthy, it would have created more opportunities for Preston Smith to get a better matchup. Because Galette can take on these left tackles in the NFL. He's a dog. He has all the moves for it. He has counters for everything. So I think the same thing for Kerrigan. He's not a top dog pass rusher, which we don't have right now with Galette out.
I've always said he's a kind of a B+ level pass rusher. He's an 8 to 10 sack a year guy. That's kind of who Kerrigan is.
And that's fine. You need someone that is a consistent pressure guy though that can complement a guy like Kerrigan.
Yeah. With Preston Smith, I thought last year he came on really well towards the end of the year. And I thought he was going to take the next step this year.
I thought so too.
so far he hasn't. He has flashed more than people recognize. He hasn't been able to finish sacks off, so he's not getting the sack numbers that everyone looks at and focuses on. But I wonder whether there was a lot of last year made of the veterans in the locker room trying to sort of stay on him and try to make sure that he works as hard as he can to fulfill his potential.
They need to do that again.
I wonder whether that's playing a factor in it. I know Terrence Knighton was supposedly a big influence on him, trying to get him to, and that's why in the second half last year is why he suddenly took off, because supposedly he was putting all this extra work in and it was starting to click for him that what it takes to be a professional. And I'm wondering that it's pure speculation on my behalf, but I'm wondering whether maybe someone needs to pull him aside and say, hey, we need to get back to this.
Yeah, I guess we'd be remiss in not pointing out that the Bengals ran frequently this bunch formation on bunch receivers on one side, stacked twins on the other, that the announcers on TV were calling chaos formation, and then sometimes they would move out of it and have all those guys move.
Apparently we called it Daffy Duck. The Redskins called it Daffy Duck for some reason.
It's a little. You don't see a lot of bunch on one side and stacked on the other like that. It is a bit unusual. Mark, what was your take on that formation used by the Bengals?
It's something they've used for a while. It's something they started using more with Hugh Jackson once Jay Gruden came here. I say here to DC. Right. Hugh Jackson started implementing this thing, which has seen in college a couple times. I think Chip Kelly ran it a lot in Oregon. And essentially, you have 3 options for the quarterback, and you just play. It's purely a numbers game.
It's like a swinging gate without the offensive line out there, basically. The way it looks like to me.
You play numbers. You see on one side of the field you've got 2 screen options with blockers essentially. So you can throw a bubble screen to your right, a bubble screen to your left, or you can hand it off. And if you've got a relatively athletic quarterback, and Dalton falls into that category, then you can run read option as well. And you play numbers.
Nice run today.
You play numbers. So if they have 2 defenders over a 3 receiver side, then you throw the screen to that. If you have 3 defenders on that side and 2 on the other, then you throw the other side. If they play for the screens and they leave the box light, then you run the ball. It's incredibly simple football. It's purely based on numbers. But they run it usually a couple times every week, and they always get production out of it. The only way that it fails is if you force them to run the ball, and then you can get someone to blow up the run. But usually you're left with 2 or 3 run defenders against 2 or 3 blockers. So it's rare that happens. It's a weird formation. It's a bit funky. It's something that they run pretty often, and it's been pretty successful for them.
All right, so let's speculate for a second. Tuesday coming up is the trade deadline. Do you think the Redskins make a move for Sheldon Richardson? Apparently talks are picking up about him.
Personally, I'd be shocked if they did.
I would be too. I just wanted to throw that out there.
Yeah, I mean, you know how the NFL is. People don't make trades.
Not at the deadline, at least. Not important trades at the deadline. Yeah,
it's not like it's not like the NBA deadline. That's for sure.
No, it's not like or the Major League Baseball deadline where you'll always see a flurry of trades.
True.
Right.
Yeah.
It's just because of the hard salary cap. It's too hard to manage balance all that.
That and guys coming in mid-season not knowing the playbook.
Yeah.
True.
Yeah.
Complicates everything. Yeah.
Yep.
All right. Well, maybe on that point, we can move on. Actually, let's ask you this, Mark. We'll give you the final word on the game today. What cost us the win? Let's say, was it missed opportunities on offense, or sloppy play on defense, or what?
It's really. I hate putting it down on one thing because you can usually put it down.
That's the game, Mark. You have to.
I mean,
they box them in. Yeah.
If you absolutely have to, you say the thing that lost the game was the missed field goal at the end because that would have won the game.
You just puts Bullock friend of the show.
Yeah, you got me on that one. Okay.
But I mean, there's always a number of factors, and you can always go back and say, hey, if we'd done this, then we would have been better off, or if so and so hadn't dropped a catch, or if Josh Norman makes a pick six, that's the game won.
If Garcon's big catch at the end hadn't been called a penalty, you
never know. That could all make a big difference. So it's incredibly tough, especially on the one person that you're faulting, to say that was the reason we didn't win this game. Because you can always go back and say, well, actually, when we correct mistakes, we should have won that game by 20 or 30 points or whatever. But yeah, if you put it on one thing, it would have to be that field goal at the end.
Yeah. Okay. Now they're getting their bye week at the right time.
Yeah. Seriously.
They kind of need to take
healthy.
a week and reset.
Well, maybe they can get healthy, and we have a lot of injuries that are kind of taking nicks and cuts and bruises and stuff. Yeah, that's that's starting to. Our injury list is always twice as long as every opponent. Put it that way. Well, let's just roll through the injuries real fast. Morgan Moses banged up. Deshaun Jackson came out of the game early. Niles Paul looked like he had a fairly serious shoulder injury. Chris Baker got nicked up, came back in. Will Compton had, I believe, a thumb. Breland banged up. Norman banged up, and Will Blackman banged up.
All right, cool. Well, we will end it there. We'll let you go, Mark, because we're.
Well, hold on a minute. I gotta ask.
But we have. Well, I was just gonna say we have to ask you a little bit because I feel like people are curious. I know I can't be the only one. What was it like, man, over there having the game in your neck of the woods? And I wanted to ask you too. It seemed like there were a good number of Redskins fans. Do you think Redskins fans are one of the more followed teams over there, or one of the less followed teams, or is there any perception of that at all?
Yeah, for me, it's kind of tough. I mean, I didn't go to the game. I wasn't there this afternoing, so
you're
I
out
couldn't
of London.
tell you
You're
exactly.
not in London itself, so.
Yeah, no, I'm a couple hours away from London, so.
Being over there in the UK, I'd just be curious how the fandom kind of breaks down. You think?
Yeah, it can be tough at times because, like, it's not something where you'll walk down the street and you'll see people wearing jerseys all the time. Like, if you walk down the street in DC, you'll probably see 4 or 5 guys wearing Redskins jerseys or that kind of stuff. You don't see here. So you don't really bump into too many people that know the sport and like the sport. It's certainly not that it's obvious that they do. It's fine. Being able to find the social aspect of the game is very, very different. We don't have any of the kind of the tailgating stuff. The best kind of thing we have is a buddy of mine and I will watch games most weekends, and we'll go to the local fish and chip shop like 30 minutes before the game and get fish and chips, and then come back and have that while watching the game.
I mean, that's not far off from what I did today, which was pretty good.
I was gonna say that's a pretty genuine experience, man.
Yeah.
So that's kind of the closest we get. But in terms of Redskins fans in England, I believe it's one of the more supported. I'm not sure it's top 5. I would say like the Patriots probably the top, but the Redskins are certainly up there.
Do you think that's just because it's one of the older teams, or?
They came here for a preseason game in, I think it was 92.
Yes.
Back in 1992.
Yeah.
And so when a lot of the kind of that generation of fans got into the sport, they naturally took the Redskins. So
sure.
I think a large portion of the fans you would have seen today would have been from that initial game that came over.
Wow.
But
well, let's talk about the sort of the bigger picture. The bigger picture is that the NFL is just the NFL front office, at least, is just desperate to get an NFL team in London, and that's why we're playing all these London games. What is it? Six games this year, I think.
Something like that.
Yeah, and so
2 in a row, 2 weeks in a row now, right?
I mean, to me, there's way too many logistical issues to have just one team in Europe. It seems like you'd have to have a division. But sort of the bigger question is, do you think the Great Britain can support or even wants a permanent NFL team?
It's a really tough one, because what having a team here would bring would be the social aspect that we don't get with you guys, that you guys get in the States. Because at this point, the NFL sends over basically every rubbish game they can.
This was probably the best one.
This one was the best one we've had in a while, but we get Jags and Dolphins and rubbish like that every week normally.
A lot of St. Louis Rams and Jaguars and
exactly, all of that. That it's going to be bad games, but I mean it's the 1 or 2 times a year where like all the NFL fans in England get the chance to have the social aspect of the game, so they all flock over to London and they have a big fan appreciation day on the Saturday, where everyone gets to get together and meet up and talk about the game and enjoy the game, and then they have the game on the Sunday where they all get to go to the stadium. And you'll see if you look at like pictures and shots of the stadium today, you won't just have seen like Redskins jerseys and Bengals jerseys. You'll have seen them for everywhere. There'll be Patriots ones, there'll be Packers, there'll be all sorts of jerseys in the stadium. They're just happy to have the sport here, to have the social side of things. But whether a team here would work, I don't know, because as it is just a one-off thing, it's something that people can justify making a trip to London. A trip to London is far more expensive than many people would think, especially if you're going to go for the Saturday fan day thing and then try to stay in a hotel overnight. That'll be really bloody expensive. So whether they would be able to justify doing that for 8 games a season, I don't know. And how many people would switch from their current teams that they support to the London team, I don't know. I don't know if many people would. I mean, I certainly wouldn't. I'd have an interest in the London team. I'd probably adopt them as maybe a second team. But if it's a case of the London team or the Redskins, I'm still taking the Redskins. So
I love that one.
I think that's probably going to be the case of most people. I don't know whether it's kind of potentially maybe a similar situation for like how the Nats when they moved to DC, and whether everyone kind of did people abandon the Orioles then, or and then just go straight to the Nats?
I'll be honest, a lot actually did. I did, but that it also helps that the Orioles historically were so bad that it was very easy to abandon a team that didn't want to spend money and didn't want to compete.
Right.
Yeah.
So
I
don't think anyone's swapping like being a Pats supporter or a Packers supporter to support the London Jags or the London Rams or whatever crap they send over.
London Bridges.
Yeah.
The London Bridges.
Yeah, the hard part will be finding a good name anyway, because the Monarchs is kind of cursed at this point. So,
well, the Monarchs are my alma mater. But anyway,
no, that was the name of the old London arena, or not arena, NFL Europe team, wasn't it? Too.
I don't remember.
Yeah.
But I mean, I think fan base aside, like no matter who you root for in London, I think you can definitely say that they got a great game today. Regardless if you're a
first overtime
fan of the Bengals or the Redskins, it was a great game to watch as a football watcher.
Yeah, it was definitely a good one for neutrals and to get sort of fans into the game and actually enjoying it, rather than seeing a one-sided blowout or a 3-3 game that ends with a field goal to finish at 6-3. That stuff is boring. But this one was actually a high-scoring game that wasn't like terrible defense. There was at least some decent defense being played in the game. So it was a tight game that was entertaining right up until the last minute. So that they deserve credit for that one, for sending that one over. But it doesn't happen often enough, I don't think.
The hard part for me is if you were to put a team in London, you've got to find another place to put one for a good rivalry, and I just don't know where else in Europe, period, that you could do that. Paris wouldn't care. Maybe Germany, maybe Scotland. I don't know. And that would
the bigger question is: do you make those teams travel? Do you make the London team travel to Seattle, or San Diego, and turn right around? And are you going to make the Dallas Cowboys travel to London and then turn right around and play another road game in St. Louis or something? That's the problem.
Yeah,
play on an aircraft carrier in the middle of the
that would be sweet.
Yeah. The way you'd have to do it, from my perspective, is you'd have to either have them play all their home games for the first 8 weeks, have a bye, and then have a base over in the States to go and play their away games.
Sure.
No, that's true.
That would be the one way, or you split it up into like 4 weeks and a bye, and then 8 weeks back here, and then the final 4 weeks back in the States. But that would mean you'd have to have a base. You'd have to have a base in the States for them to train at during the week before they fly over to wherever they're playing. So at that point, are they really still a London team if they have a base in the States as well? Or it has a lot of messy logistics to it. But that would be the only way I could potentially see it happening.
Sure.
Mm-hmm. There's money there, so they'll find a way. I'm sure.
Yeah.
That's if Roger Goodell doesn't go down in flames first. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, we'll see. Anyways, thank you for being on the show today, Mark. You are awesome. You're like our biggest repeat guest ever, and we hope to keep having you because it's always fun when you're on, man. So thank you so much, especially on today when the team was over there, man. Right. Yeah, you are the man. Thank you.
It's nice to have you on when it's not 2 a.m. on your time. So.
Yeah, seriously.
That's pretty nice from my end as well. Yeah. Thanks for having me on. It's always good fun.
Good having you on, Mark.
Absolutely. Cool. Well, thank you for being with us, you listeners at home, and we'll see you guys next time right here on the Hogsty. Take care.